What's going on, everybody? Joe here from Excursion Cuts. Tonight I'm posting the first of a series of videos that are going to cover color correction and color grading. So I've posted videos on color grading in the past, but they were randomly posted videos, as opposed to being videos that followed any kind of logical sequence. So I wanted to take you guys through the entire process, and since several of you have expressed satisfaction with the short, to-the-point nature of my videos, I thought it best to release several videos on the topic, as it's pretty involved. So the first thing I want to mention about color correction and grading is that they are necessary steps in your post-production pipeline, meaning it's more than a cool thing that you can do to your footage to make it pleasing to the eye. Cameras rarely, if ever, capture footage the way we would like our audience to see it, so it's going to require some technical fixes, color correction, as well as stylistic color treatments, grading. Alright, so I'm going to assume that at this point you have captured your footage, made all of your edits, and now basically have picture lock. You may have filmed your footage with a natural or neutral picture profile, or you may have filmed with a log profile. Either way, the process is similar, you'll just have more latitude with log footage. More on that later. Okay, so I have a couple of shots here that we're going to correct. If you search color grading on YouTube, you'll undoubtedly hear people say that it's important to color correct your footage before you grade it. This is true, but what does that mean? Does that mean that I adjust tone before altering color using the same instance of the same tool? Or does that mean that I color correct with one instance of a tool and then add a second instance to grade? Does that mean that I color correct each shot in a scene and then use an adjustment layer to apply a stylized grade? Any one of those options is going to work, but let me show you why it's necessary to color correct, that is, adjust tone and color balance, prior to shifting your hues around. So before we get into the detailed color correction process, I do want to really quick discuss some of these scopes. Right now I have the Waveform Scope open. By the way, if you're a photographer and you're just, dipping your feet into video, the one thing you're going to be pleasantly surprised with is the types of scopes that we have to work with. Histograms are going to look really ghetto to you after you start working with some of these video scopes, but the Waveform will give you information on luminance, brightness. It doesn't deal with color saturation. It's just going to give you an idea of how dark and how bright your image is. Down here at 0, where we bottom out at 0, is going to be pure black. Up here at 100 would be pure white. So you can almost think of it as a vertical histogram, but what's really cool about the waveform is the image itself is represented from left to right. But what I mean by that is you can see these spikes right here between the green, the blue, and the red with these black gaps in between. That actually corresponds to the trees here. Okay, so this over here on the left is this white spot over here. This dark spot right here would be this tall tree, and so on and so forth. So just kind of understand how the waveform works. This is typically the scope that people will reach for when they're doing basic color correction, meaning just adjusting the tonal values of your image. So in all of the scopes, all of this colorful speckles that you've got over here in the middle, this is called trace. Okay, so it doesn't matter what scope you're working with, you're going to refer to this as trace. And in short, in the color correction process, what I need to do is I need to take this trace and I need to get it to occupy more space instead of this narrow sliver here in the middle. I need to bring some of this trace closer to pure black, and I need to get some of this other trace up here closer to pure white. This is why this image looks so milky and disgusting right now. Now I'm going to go ahead and reset my color corrector here. But by the way, if you're unfamiliar with this is a third-party plugin by Red Giant called Colorista. This is version 4. Extremely handy tool. You get some really good results. It's GPU accelerated, which means it's also really fast. I have here this clip which was shot in Vlog on the Panasonic GH5, and you can see on the waveform monitor that nothing in this image is pure black and nothing in this image is pure white. That's why we shoot in log, because it gives us the flexibility to start pushing things around as we see fit. But with such low contrast and such low saturation, if I start to take the wheel and push things, say, towards the shadows, pushing the blues towards the shadows, you're not really going to get the results you might expect with doing this. This actually looks like a sort of ugly hue of blue, and it still looks really washed out, and it's just not taking the form that we really want it to take. And that's because I don't really have any part of this image that's technically in the zone of shadows. The same is true with the highlights. If I start to take something and maybe push orange or something towards the highlights, again, we're kind of getting this ugly color wash over the image, and that's because I don't technically have any highlights in this image. Highlights would be way up here. And that's why we have, you know, when you shoot in log, you end up with this really narrow sliver of trace in the middle of your waveform. Color correction is going to be really important prior to your color grade so that everything lands in the place that it's supposed to land. Let's go ahead and start to basically color correct some of this. Now on this tool, and I'm not going to get into the details on the tools, but I just want you to watch the trace over here in the waveform monitor and see what happens. You can also see what's going to happen over here to the image itself when I start to drop the values of the shadows. You can see that trace coming down almost as an entire group. But now if I go with the highlights, the bright parts of the image, and I start to drag that in the opposite direction, now we're starting to stretch this out a bit. I can even scroll down here. I'm going to come over here to my curves adjustment. I'm going to boost the S curve, which is going to stretch out the entire thing. So now we're getting a little bit closer to where we might want to be. I'm going to leave a little bit of wiggle room, as I do like to do. Mind you, we're just kind of thinking about tone right now. Never mind the colors. You'll notice that as you boost the contrast that the colors do appear a little bit more saturated, which is fine, but right now we're really just focusing on the tone. I'll bring this up a little bit. Now there's detail everywhere in the image, and you'll notice that when I started to boost the contrast, this area of the trees right here did get a lot darker. But if you really look at it, I can still see detail in there. I haven't crushed any blacks. We can see on the waveform monitor that I don't have anything in this image that's yet pure black, nor do I have anything in this image that is pure white. As blown out as these skies look, there really is some room to move there, so I think we're headed in the right direction here. What I want to do right now is kind of turn your attention to a different scope. I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce you to the RGB parade. And grab that really quick. And I'm going to shut off the waveform for right now just so it's easier for you guys to see. Now, this is similar in concept to the waveform, in that the 0 down here is going to represent pure black, and the 100 up here is going to represent pure white. The farther this trace is spread apart, the more contrast or more tonal range you've got on your shot. So what's different here is, the waveform monitor from left to right actually represented the image from left to right. But what you've got right here, you can almost think of this as a histogram that's been tilted on its side and spread apart between the RGB channels. So this is going to be a really good visual representation as to how we're doing in terms of color balance or white balance. So what we want, if the image was balanced, meaning it was devoid of a color cast, all of these things would be lined up pretty much the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and change something in here just so you see what happens to the RGB parade as I start tweaking the color temperature. Let's say I cool this off big time. In theory, if I yank this color temperature slider over to the left, we should see the red trace go down, we should see the blue trace go up. And conversely, if I yank that color temperature slider over to the right, we should see the left go up and the blue go down. Okay, now the tint slider will do something that's kind of cool. Let's say the red and the blue trace were relatively balanced, but the green was lower or higher. Your tint is going to adjust the green relative to the red and the blue. Alright, so basically as long as these are somewhat centered over here, you're going to have color that looks relatively accurate as a starting point. Mind you, we're going to start shoving color all around when we're color grading for stylistic purposes. But for right now, if there's a giant color cast in your image, it's going to be in our best interest to correct it. We don't want something like this. If we're starting from this point, it's going to be a little bit tricky when we start doing a stylized grade. We also don't want to start from this point. We would probably want to level this out a little bit before we start working with style. Alright guys, at this point we've applied some basic color correction to our footage. Things look the way they should look. The water looks blue, the trees look green, the bricks look gray. This is an excellent starting point for our color grade. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified when I release the next installment of this short series. Take it easy guys.